good, Hank?
Mr. Chairman, we are live and the floor is yours.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Start with roll call.
Bob Paul, present.
Sheldon Cohn.
Chris Gombieski.
Blake Moore.
Rick Poland. We'll move on to approval of tonight's agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, I understand number 6 is deferred, so we can adopt the agenda is just fine. I'm just saying that.
I think we'll defer it at that time, right?
You can either adopt it and defer it, table it at that point in time.
Okay.
or-
Yep, we'll do it at that time.
But that is going to happen, correct?
Okay.
All right, so we had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes. Approval of minutes from June 27th, 2022.
One correction, Mr. Chairman, that I saw. On the second page, second paragraph, about 3 lines up from the bottom that starts 480 square feet. I believe the word should be now, not.
That is correct. I have that as a change already, but yes.
All right, any other modifications? Can I get a motion?
I motion to approve with Sheldon's change.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on to item 5, master plan adoption hearing. Hank, you want to give us a little summary?
Absolutely. Basically, to start this off, I'd like to introduce, for those of you that don't remember, those of you in the audience, this is Brad Strader from MKSK, our planning consultant firm for the master plan, who is going to be here going through a presentation this evening. He'll be able to answer questions that you have. Again, this is also a situation where we will be taking public comment. So, and then that's really about it for right now. So with that said, I'll turn the floor back over to you, and Brad can begin his presentation at your pleasure.
Thanks, Hank. It's good to see you all again. Just going to go through a brief overview of the master plan and hitting the highlights, and then be here to help you and Hank answer any questions from the public after we get through. Maybe. You have to come from over there.
That's not cooperating. Let's see here.
I can probably do the whole thing from this slide if I need to.
Just tell me when to advance.
Okay. So just an agenda or an overview of what we're covering here tonight is, this is kind of the agenda, but what is the master plan, going through the process and how we got to where we are and coming up with a draft plan, and then going through the plan organization, and then a slide or two on each of the chapters of the plan, and then the action plan. So just a reminder, most of you in the audience look familiar to me, and you've probably been at some of the previous meetings, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but a master plan is in the purview of the Planning Commission. It's the physical plan for the city, looking at land uses, commercial, residential, parks, and streets, and so forth. And then other things that came up in the process were economic development or redevelopment and sustainability. And then at the end is an action plan and a zoning plan. So there are things that came out of the process that were very interesting, but didn't really apply to the master plan. So some of the comments we had were the city should do this or city should do that, and that was all tracked and recorded, but that's not in the master plan, but it's being tracked separately. So even when we heard comments from the public that weren't related to the master plan, that information was retained. So building consensus, that was a big part of why the city, I think, wanted to work with MKSK to really look as to have an extensive amount of public involvement. So the master plan is really a combination of technical evaluation of the best practices and sort of our experience. We've done a lot of master plans in Michigan and elsewhere. A lot of direction from workshops with the Planning Commission and some with the City Commission. You know, we went through the process. A lot of it was during COVID, so we had people tuning into COVID meetings as well and Zoom meetings and provide a comment in that way with Zooms and chat and so forth. So kind of a combination of input of the Planning Commission, City Commission, public information, and our expertise. And then the specifics of the master plan are all based on the Michigan Planning Act that says these are the requirements that have to be in the Michigan Planning Act. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation has a program called Redevelopment Ready Community Certification, and they outline some elements for the master plan that need to be considered. So, and they help pay for the plan itself. So that's kind of the background of how we got to where we are. So this is a summary of the process. We had said at the beginning that a master plan will take 12 to 18 months. And because of COVID, it went a little longer, but here we are at about month 18. So right about where the adoption was going to be. We started back in February 2021 and have had a number of public meetings, and we'll talk about the engagement process here. So we had a lot of opportunities for the public to participate. So we obviously had some in-person workshops and meetings, virtual meetings, but we also had a open house at the Recreation Center where we had over 100 people, pretty good turnout, and a lot of comments, and some of the people here tonight I think were at that event as well. We also had a community-wide survey and website updates, and we had 550 people, or over 550 people participated. So that's a really high percentage of people that participated and provided comments. Some just commented on the plans, some commented on recommendations or cited on priorities or so forth. We also had a review it was sent to the adjacent communities, and we heard back from Pleasant Ridge and Oak Park supporting the plan, and also from Oakland County Economic Development and Planning. And sort of the last step of the process is the official public hearing, which is required in the Michigan Planning Act, which is the event we're having this evening. So what is the summary of engagement? And again, a lot of ideas that came out of the planning process when the public was not in favor and the Planning Commission was in favor. Some of those ideas aren't in the plan. So that was a recognition of the public had influence over the recommendations of the plan, the priorities and so forth, and certainly the Planning Commission. But the top priorities that are related to the master plan are listed here. So one was stormwater management or green infrastructure. Sometimes we talked about climate change or sustainability, drainage and so forth, but that was number one. And then road maintenance was number two. Increased sustainability came up through the process, and the Planning Commission went back and forth as what is sustainability in the relationship of Huntington Woods. So we've crafted sustainability in context of the master plan and added a new chapter. A lot of discussion about Parks and Recreation being changing with the times and Parks and Recreation. So there's a separate Parks and Recreation plan, but we have sort of the highlights of what we go into the next Parks and Recreation plan update is in the master plan. A lot of discussion about housing and should we have diversification of housing? What type of housing is it? What's the appropriate in Huntington Woods versus things that might be in demand but should be provided in other areas because we don't have a lot of residential properties, so we'll cover that a little bit. And then also crosswalks and street improvements. Most of the discussion on crosswalks was 11 Mile, getting across 11 Mile, across the 11 or 12,000 vehicles that drive on 11 Mile. Plan organization, this is the main contents of the plan, and I'll talk about each of these. Future land use, sort of green infrastructure, complete streets, a little bit more on economic development, because one of the key things of the RFP was to look at the land outside of the residential area and come up with recommendations for the future there. There was a separate plan for diversion, equity, and inclusion, so we have a summary of that, but it's a separate plan, just like the Parks and Recreation is separate. And there's also a preservation plan. We summarize that and refer the reader back to that plan, but we wanted to make sure that we're consistent with that plan. And then I'll cover zoning plan, that's a requirement of the Planning Act. So future land use, this is a complicated chapter in a lot of communities that have lots of commercial and industrial and places to develop or redevelopment, but here it's a very stable residential community, and our focus was really on retaining the viability of the neighborhoods, looking at ways to upgrade parks and the streets, and then the areas that are non-residential to look at redevelopment opportunities for those parcels on Woodward, 11 Mile, and Coolidge. And then sustainability came up through the public, and we've had a couple meetings with the Planning Commission on what is sustainability in terms of the Huntington Woods and what's in the right context for a sustainability plan. So we came up with a different chapter, and that this outlines what would go into a sustainability plan. Some Planning Commission members and the public said, well, what about a climate action plan? Because Ferndale has one, Royal Oak has a climate action plan, but their positions are a little bit different, and but we did want to highlight that there is a climate action plan and some things that can be done if the city decides to move forward on a separate climate action plan or sustainability plan. But if not, we at least wanted to list all the things in the master plan that we think are leading toward a more sustainable lifestyle, more support for energy efficiency and alternative energy methods, even solar power, different ways of getting people to walk and bicycle instead of just driving. We'll talk about green infrastructure and how to reduce some of the stormwater runoff using green infrastructure, and then looking at other sustainable elements. This is some of the photos of some of the green infrastructure best practices that could be incorporated as capital improvements projects. So if there's changes to 11 Mile or Coolidge or a park or here at the City Hall complex, that some of these elements could be incorporated into the redevelopment to help reduce the stormwater runoff. Complete Streets Plan was another requirement of the Michigan Planning Act. It's a pretty bikeable city through the neighborhoods, but we did highlight, as it was highlighted in previous plans, the sort of the focus of some of the major bike routes that people are driving through Huntington Woods and want to know are directed to key routes that connect people with Berkeley and Oak Park and Royal Oak. So we wanted to highlight those. And also the main thing we heard from the pedestrian was getting pedestrians more safely across 11 miles. So we've identified a couple of locations where you could improve pedestrian connections. Then the areas outside of the residential, one of the focuses was Woodward Avenue. So there's been a lot of discussion amongst all the Woodward Avenue communities from Detroit and Ferndale and Oak Park and Royal Oak and Birmingham and the Bloomfields all the way up to Pontiac about consistency and focus on Woodward Avenue. So we did want to look at the Woodward Avenue properties on the west side of Woodward in Huntington Woods. We've had some comments from the public about the intersection right at Lincoln, but that's in Royal Oak. But the area shown on the map on the left is the part that's in Huntington Woods, and a lot of those are older office buildings, 3-story with service drives in the front, maybe a little bit tired, not the best place for walking. There's not much aesthetics there, so one of the focuses we have is how can we encourage redevelopment of these areas. They're privately owned, so you have to have some zoning to encourage redevelopment. So that was one of the goals here, and I think all the Woodward communities, including Huntington Woods, have kind of committed to working together with MDOT, with the Regional Transit Authority and the transit organizations toward redeveloping Woodward. So this is one of the concepts out of the plan where we were asked to come up with a transit-oriented redevelopment plan, and this would be sort of just phases, which this would be sort of the ultimate rebuild where you'd have some new development coming in that is multiple story, a little less parking, turning the service drive into parallel parking, improving the pedestrian and sidewalk connections across Woodward. This shows in red bus rapid transit lane or exclusive transit lane. Right now we have SMART has the rapid bus that has some of the benefits of a bus rapid transit, but the goal is to work toward bus rapid transit stops up and down Woodward, and that Huntington Woods would participate in that with all the communities and agencies that would be involved. And then Coolidge was another area. So there's some property along Coolidge that could be redeveloped. You've got some large parking lots that could have infill or redevelopment in those parking lots. And so we looked at the existing conditions and the potential for infill, recognizing that if there is infill, you still want to have good buffering from the properties to the east, the residential properties to the east. So in that, we came up with several different concepts and worked with the Planning Commission and the public to revise those. And this isn't saying that the projects there now couldn't continue, or the development in the future, but to show that you could have a mixture of uses. You could get some townhomes in there. You could have a multiple-story mixed-use building that could be retail or restaurant or something on the first floor, and office or residential on the second or third floor. So these are just some concepts of redevelopment that could happen, and this would be consistent with the MEDC's Redevelopment Ready Community Program. And then one of the goals of the master plan in the Planning Act is to come up with the future land use plan and all the other recommendations and look at zoning to see if the zoning needs to change. So we did, at the public events and working with the Planning Commission, did look at a number of changes to zoning. One was to relax the setback standards in residential areas. Another was to have accessory dwelling units to allow garages or accessory dwelling units to be constructed on properties. We went back and forth, what are the pros of that, what are the cons of that, and the Planning Commission ultimately decided with input from the public to not have accessory dwelling units and to not relax the setback standards and keep them as they are, with the idea of somebody wants to have something unique on the property, that it's better to go to the zoning board on a case-by-case basis and let them make that pitch rather than changing the standard. So we had done a lot of work. We had, some of you were maybe at the public workshop where we showed different visuals and pros and cons, and all those ideas were considered by the Planning Commission but were dropped from the final plan. So the changes, the zoning plan changes that would be contemplated are pretty minimal. I think the feeling was the zoning ordinance works pretty well, and the main change would be these commercial areas on Woodward and Coolidge. And then I think I mentioned briefly, we did have a letter of support from Oakland County, and then two of the adjacent communities. The other communities that were notified did not respond. And then the Planning Commission spent like 2 meetings at least, and Hank spent a lot of time going through all the 49 recommendations that we have and deciding what are the priorities, who's responsible, making sure it was clear. And so these, the recommendations are listed by the plan topic with the action and then the general time frame, and if it's a medium, high, or low priority or ongoing, and then who's the responsible party. So that kind of summarizes the recommendations in the master plan at the end. And in addition to that, we do have an appendix that has some of the surveys and some of the other information that was used. And so that was all available digitally or on hard copy. So that's kind of an overview of how we got to where we are. The next step in the process is for the Planning Commission to open up the public hearing, hear comments, and then the Planning Commission can either adopt the plan and then forward it on to the City Commission, or you can postpone it, and if you want some changes to the draft, you would need to direct us and Hank as what those changes are to have it come back to you. So that's it. Be happy to answer any questions from the Planning Commission before you open up the public hearing.
All right, Hank, anything else to add?
No, I think Brad pretty well covered it. I think that the next thing that you want to do is you want to take public participation on it, have a discussion among yourselves, and make a motion to whatever your pleasure would be. But
Okay.
public participation is going to be what you want to do next.
Okay. All right, we'll open it up to public participation. Come forward to the mic, state your name and address. There is a 2-minute limit on comments. And if you have some questions at the end of your comment period, Brad can address them if he can. But we'll go ahead and open it up for public participation.
Thank you. My name is Steve Gold. I'm a 33-year resident of Huntington Woods. I live at 26764 York. My comments, first of all, about the master plan are that I think it was very professionally executed. Many important issues were considered, and I'm pleased to see my city doing such good work to plan for its future. The exception that I would find to that general comment is with regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion. 5 years ago, when I retired from my position as Director of Health and Community Services for Macomb County, I offered a white paper on diversity to the City Commission. It was read. The city briefly considered and approved having a diversity committee. Then they decided to not have the diversity committee because diversity was going to be included in the master plan. As the gentleman from the consultant has said, that's a separate plan. There is reference to it in a summary in the master plan. When the RFP went out, the city said that it would like to explore how to build upon our strengths to encourage diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community, and that the selected consultant will present a report with their findings and recommendations to the City Commission, which will foster an inclusive and welcoming community and shall include best management practices from other small cities. Contract was awarded in 2021 to Volar Consultants, Jade Strategies, who promised in their proposal a plan with timeline, dates, roles, and responsibilities, and a comprehensive DE&I report and strategy that includes, I'm quoting, current Huntington Woods DEI strengths and weaknesses, undercurrent of perceived or real biases, areas to address to be a more inclusive and welcoming community, and recommendations that are aligned with master plan and anti-racism framework. The report that is summarized, the work that was done contains essentially none of that, contains demographic information, which anybody can easily find and find in more detail if you bother to talk to SEMCOG. It does contain...
Please wrap up your comments.
Yeah, thank you. I know 2 minutes is long. I'll simply say that for $20,000, which either has or hasn't been paid yet, the city has not received what it should have received, and what it should have received and said that it wanted is very important. And so I am disappointed that the promised inclusion of a DEI plan with the master plan has been put by the board. It is promised to appear at some indefinite future date, and I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think they did a job which could produce what the city wants and needs. So I have to add that caveat to my general approval of the master plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments.
I could just make one comment. So I think I respect the comment, and I think we tried to include diversity, equity, inclusion, but it was a separate plan as we started the process. So it is correct that it's kind of limited. The summary of the DEI plan, we used the summary of what was available. So I think it's an appropriate comment that some of the things like time frame and other things that we hope to drop into the master plan weren't available when we did the master plan. And so hopefully if that development, equity, and inclusion plan continues, that a better summary can go into the master plan and amendment in the future. So.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Harold Stack, 13108 Talbot Avenue. I agree that the plan is better than the original plan, largely because a lot of citizens complained about the lack of sustainability issues in the plan. That's been improved to some degree. I think the plan overall is still basically an embarrassment to the city and the consultants that the city paid $40,000 to develop. I have a couple of quick questions. One is, will the commission actually monitor implementation of this plan, unlike the past? That's one question. The second question, it goes to our consultant, why was the energy plan not included in this plan? And then, maybe to Hank, what happened to the appendix that included the evaluation of the last plan? It's no longer in that plan. Those are my three questions. Appreciate any answers.
Brad, do you?
I can comment on a couple of, I think the energy plan is important, but it's not part of the master plan. So there are additional plans, and if there's a better reference, but that's why it's not in there, because the energy plan is dealing with things outside of the master plan.
I'm sorry, isn't the energy plan related to sustainability?
So the recommendation,
Excuse me, we're not gonna allow for discussion, just comment and answers at this point.
so we did put into the plan that since there was interest in energy and other things, and I had it on the slide there, but it's in more detail in the plan, that kind of either a climate change plan or sustainability plan would be a separate plan, because it wasn't part of the master plan, but it could be a separate plan like some of the other communities have done. And so energy and other things would go into that sustainability plan. I don't think the sustainability plan has to be long or detailed, but it could talk about specifically to Huntington Woods and what can be done in the short and long. And, the same things that were brought up in the DI plan would be the things that would go into a sustainability plan or whatever the city would choose to call it. And then like energy profile could be part of that with short-term goals and so forth. So we're all supportive of those things, but it's outside of the master plan.
Okay, thanks.
In the
Hank?
appendix of the previous plan, that was a worksheet, but you don't usually include that in the master plan. I mean, you could, or you could have it available on the website, but you don't usually include a summary of the last plan. And this plan sort of reflects what's been done. We went through the previous plan with the planning commission, what's been done, check it off, what wasn't done but doesn't apply anymore, and then what are the things that we should keep in and what are things to refine or add. So the master plan reflects that discussion, but we didn't include the whole appendix, include that in the appendix.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Hank, anything to add?
Yes, and I do want to add to Mr. Stack's question about will we be monitoring this, and the answer is yes. We've gone through and we've implemented the priority list for the planning commission. The number one thing that was on the priority list for the last year and a half was the master plan. So having said that, now that we revised the master plan and hopeful in anticipation of adoption this evening, at the end of the year, you will get a report as to what we have accomplished or where we are status-wise in that. That will not only be available to the planning commission, but that will also be available to the general public, as it should. So that's where we're at with how that's going to work. But there are priority list items. Those, you voted on them at the last meeting to adopt them. And at this point in time, we're already starting to work on some of them. And we will go forward with that, and you'll be provided at the end of the year. And that'll be November because we don't have a December meeting.
This is unlike the past.
It is kind of, and I don't want to have a conversation away from the microphone, but the answer is, yeah, it is and it isn't. We have done it in the past, but during master plans and subsequent things, sometimes that doesn't take as precedence as other items that we might be looking at as a planning commission.
Okay, thank you, Hank. Anyone else? All right, we will close public participation and move to commission comments, starting with Mayor Paul.
I don't have any comments other than to thank the planning commission for the last year and a half for all the hard work you've put into this. I sort of jumped on the planning commission at the end of it, so it's been easy on me, but thanks for all your hard work.
Sheldon?
Yeah, mine's a procedural question. Do we recommend approval by the city commission, or is our approval just reported to the commission? I'm not sure. What the
You will adopt this plan by a vote, and you will recommend approval to the city commission, who will have the final say on it.
That's not quite what the,
That's what you'll be doing.
okay. All right, that's the only question.
Brad, just a correction, is there any, that's how, okay.
Sheldon, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
The only thing that would come up is when you adopt a plan, goes forward to the city commission, they adopt the same plan. If the city commission doesn't agree with the plan, if they want to change anything, they have to send it back to you and have both bodies agree you have to adopt the same plan.
Okay. Jill?
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Chris?
No questions or comments.
Blake?
Yeah, I mean, my only comment would be that a lot of people have put a lot of, I think, time into this, and I think this is in many ways reflective of what the community, what the city largely agrees are the priorities right now. I would also concede that, you know, it might be imperfect, but I think it does a good job kind of succinctly giving an overview of where everybody everybody's priorities and agendas are. So that's it.
All right, thanks, Blake. Gail?
I think it's a comprehensive plan. If I can ask one question, on page 48, when it talked about bump outs or bulb outs, I don't know what a bulb out is. And whether I was finding something grammatically incorrect?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, so a bump out and a bulb out is basically the same thing. So on page 49, it shows a bump out, which is the same thing as a bulb out. I think it's sort of like if you call the area between the sidewalk and the curb, is it a
Yeah,
green lawn
I
or
mean,
curb
that's,
lawn, and it's the same thing.
yeah, that's what it said, but it just confused me. I thought, well, gee, is it with flowers in it or something like that? Why are we bulbs?
Yeah.
You know, so I wondered whether it really needed to be there and confused. And I was usually the one to be the eagle eye for grammar or whatever else. And I do have a couple questions on the table of contents that I can show Hank later that are just as to whether colons need to be between certain lines.
Yep, those all.
That would be
things
fine.
correct.
Okay,
And bump outs and bulb outs, part of the reason we put both, is I always say, bump out, but some people on the survey called it two things, and I remember at the workshop, I had to draw it up and explain what it is. So hopefully that's why they're both in there. People call it
I tried to
something else.
find it in a reference to something else and couldn't find it, so I
I
thought,
think it's
oh,
in like the landscape or the Institute of Transportation Engineers Guide, and they see there's like around the country a number of different ways
thank you.
to describe it.
Okay,
Gail, you all set?
all set.
I don't have any comments. Thanks for all your hard work, Brad.
Thanks.
We'll be looking for a motion.
I'll make the motion. I move to adopt then the, master plan as presented
And recommend to the city commission.
and recommend that the city commission
Thank
adopt.
you.
So they'll be adopting it as well.
They'll be adopting it, and as Brad said, they have to adopt the same plan.
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you again. Thanks to the planning commission, all your time. We enjoyed working with you, and for the public, I think we had a lot of good public interest. People on all the Woodward communities, but especially here in Huntington Woods, were very enthusiastic about the plan and their opinions and so forth. And obviously tonight, people are passionate about what they're doing, and I think the future looks good in Huntington Woods. The master plan itself, when you pull out those 49 recommendations, that's kind of the idea of an annual report back to the city commission and say, what are we gonna do this year? And are we gonna adjust any recommendations? You can pull that out and just amend that separately without amending the plan, so it's kind of a working tool that can be used on like an annual basis or even more frequently to, as a tool to check off if things are done. So in some places, we use that plan and we just check off what's been done or underway. So that would be the comment on how to use the master plan. I think that's part of what Hank and the planning commission have committed to doing in the future, so.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to item 6, matter of site plan review of an addition to the Holmes McGuire residence at 10834 Kingston.
Thanks for checking it all, Gail. I found the typo today, too.
Mr. Chair, if we could just maybe take a 2-minute recess so that we can.
Okay.
think we're set, Mr.
I
Chair.
just wondered if you want to put that up on the easel. Oh, yeah. I know they have it behind them, but it's a.
Yes.
Here, Pete, then I think everybody can see it.
Do you want, would it be better for people in the audience if we did the lights in the front part? Can you see that better if I do that, or?
Fine from here.
Okay.
All right, we'll proceed with the site plan review for 10834 Kingston.
Good evening. My name is Michael Ostrowski. I'm the Ostrowski Design Group. My brother and associate. We are asking for approval for the site plan for the Holmes McGuire residence, which is located at 10834 Kingston Avenue. This residence was built in 1949 and is listed at 1,563 square feet. We are proposing to add to the rear of the structure a rear dormer addition to an existing 446 square foot second floor, a new master bedroom suite, which will enlarge the second floor an additional 247 square feet. We are also proposing to relocate and renovate the first floor kitchen area and rebuild the stairwell, which will update and give higher function to the kitchen as well as the overall living space. This renovation will also provide new windows, new roofing, new upgraded electrical service, plumbing, complete insulation, which there is none, throughout the total residence. The existing residence has brick, minor, smooth, and rock face cut limestone detailing, wood-sided cantilevered rear floor to room, aluminum-clad eaves, soffits, gutters, and window trim. There are also accents of exterior wood-painted panels and columns on the front and side elevations. The design proposal incorporates the use of brick sills and painted wood panel detailing, new metal-clad insulated windows and doors, painted soffits, moldings, and trim, matching roof shingles, 6-inch diameter, half-round gutters, and a very judicious use of cementitious hardy plank siding, all of which are sensitively balanced. Furthermore, the proposed addition is confined to the rear of the structure and has no exposure to the street. The proposal calls for new second-floor egress windows and replacement of existing rotted wood siding with new cementitious siding. We feel that this judicious use of siding maintains the integrity of the existing design characteristics of the residence. The proposed use and placement of the siding on the residence is proper, subtle, and suitably located on the second floor and allows for the appropriate use of this material for future upgrades to the home. This attached upper floor rear dormer addition is keeping and in character of many homes which are located in the neighborhood and of the same style and materials which we are proposing. Photos which display the typical details and finishes of these homes are presented as evidence. We are asking for your vote of confidence and approval to our design proposal so we may continue with the next phase of the Holmes McGuire project. Thank you for your kind attention. Now you got it, you can do it right here. Yep, I'll do it from here.
You should be able to. Let me just get to the other presentation for you here.
Okay.
Forgive my computer for taking a nap here.
I saved it all the way back to version 1997, Hank, so.
Um, These next photos are a survey of dormers, which are located in proximity to the home, to which we are proposing. Here are Kingston Avenue characteristic dormer styles. You can see the upper left, the dormers are located on the back of these homes. There's another one on the upper right. Again, that's Kingston, more of the dormer detailing that is pretty complete and surrounds the homes in Guire, which we are also proposing. There are a few more representatives. Yeah, they're about like 15 or so. There's some more. So we have about 8 or 9 homes that have the same somewhat detailing of that, but ours seems, think we've done a little bit better as far as our design is concerned and keeping it more in classical featuring, so. Any questions? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Hank, you want to run through the summary of it?
Yeah, hold on just a second, let me get this. All right, so basically what we have here is, this is standard for bungalows. It's popping up the back of the bungalow. As Mr. Ostrowski has gone ahead and shown photographs of, it's a very common way to add on to a bungalow. Some do it with popping the back, some do it with the reverse gable off the back. But when you have a bungalow, there's only so much you can do without adding an entire second floor. So basically, the plans that you're looking at reflect what he wants to do to that, and a lot of the second floor usage is the same space, only utilized differently. The maximum height is well below the limit. Front yard hasn't changed. Side yards haven't changed. It's got a huge side yard, so even the impact of the siding, which is usually used to help reduce mass, will be even greater than most. Most are minimum 5, total 14, which is right at the setbacks, and their minimum 5, total 23.1. So he's got the house is narrow, so it does have a lot of room between the two houses. The rear yard is required at 30, and it's 50.95, and the lot coverage comes in at 28.4%, which is less. It's under the maximum house size, including all the character bonuses. And in comparison to the houses next door, it's, either side, it's right in keeping, again, with the detached garage. So basically what you're looking at is a pretty straightforward, simple addition to this. If anybody's got any questions, I'm certainly able to answer as best I can. Both Mr. Ostrowski's can answer any questions that you might have on the design concept.
Okay, thanks, Hank. We'll open it up for public participation. All right, no public participation. Move to commission comments, starting with Mayor Paul.
I have no comments.
All right, Sheldon?
I'm good with the plan. I'm glad it was kept well within, ordinance parameters. And we didn't have to stretch. There seems to be adequate fenestration and all over. I think it's a fine plan for what's going on here.
All right, Jill?
I mean, it's straightforward and it fits within the guidelines, so I have no comments. I think it looks good.
All right, Chris?
No questions, no comments.
Blake?
I think it's a classic bungalow. I think it's consistent with the neighbors and the city. I think size and material considerations are appropriate and within the parameters, and I think it looks great.
Gail?
I think it looks great. The only question I have is what is gonna be the square footage when it's finished? Because here it says proposed 1563, and I thought you said that's what it is now.
It'll be 1,800.
Okay, that's why Hank, our notes are wrong.
No, we had the information after this
Okay.
already went. It's
Okay. I think it looks great, and it meets the criteria and needs no
It's
setback.
still under by 600.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
All right, I think it looks good. Looking for a motion.
Was there any public participation?
We did open and close public participation.
Thank you.
Move to approve the plan as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Alright.
Aye.
Thank you.
You want the plans in?
Sure, if you don't.
There's one, it's folded up.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 7, site plan review for 13120 Sherwood. I believe we are going to table this.
Mr. Chair, at this time, we've been contacted by the applicant who has some revisions that they want to make to the plan. So they've asked if we would do them the courtesy of a table till the next regular meeting.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion for that.
Move to table to the next regular meeting.
My second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving to public participation. All right, we'll close public participation.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
We should hold on.
Hank, do you want